Movies about real people meeting cartoons isn't exactly a recent thing. Most cinephiles can agree that Who Framed Roger Rabbit, released in 1988, was the movie that really launched the trend. Though if you want the earliest examples of this, you can go as far back as 1944 with The Three Caballeros. Other movies of note before Roger Rabbit are Mary Poppins, Pete's Dragon, and Bedknobs and Broomsticks, but none of those movies were able to popularize the concept quite like Roger Rabbit did. A few other movies afterwards tried similar concepts but missed the mark, like Cool World and Last Action Hero. Enter Space Jam, a movie released in 1996. If you were born in the mid to late 80s, you're probably quite familiar with the movie and hardly need an explanation. For those of you kids born afterward, Space Jam sees the Looney Tunes world get invaded by a group of aliens who challenge them to a basketball game, where if the Tunes lose, they become enslaved by said aliens. Initially, the aliens are wimpy, but steal the skills of several, at the time anyway, NBA greats to gain an advantage and refer to themselves as the Monstars. The Looney Tunes wind up recruiting Michael Jordan, perhaps one of the best basketball players of all time, to help them. He manages to avoid having his skills stolen by the Monstars because, at the time, the guy was retired from basketball and was instead pursuing baseball as his sport of choice, for whatever reason. Despite getting schooled by the Monstars in the first half of the winner-take-all basketball game, Jordan motivates the Toons and even taps into his inner cartoon, helping them win the game and the Toons' freedom. The original Space Jam did quite well at the box office, generating $250 million on an $80 million budget. A sequel was planned to get started as early as that same year, but Jordan apparently refused to start on the sequel, so the plans were scrapped. Moving away from basketball, several other sports and their then current stars were considered for the focus instead. Racing with Jeff Gordon, golfing with Tiger Woods, and even skating with Tony Hawk, but none of those ever got off the ground. Thank God. Fast forward to 2014, when Warner Bros. Announced a sequel to Space Jam, starring LeBron James. Finally, here we are in July 2021, with the sequel finally released, basically 25 years since the original released. It's been quite the ride, hasn't it? The film focuses on LeBron James and his family, though the family isn't his real family, but instead actors meant to portray fictionalized versions of his family. LeBron's youngest son, Dominic, is a computer prodigy, but LeBron's head has got the density of a brick, as he doesn't quite realize that his son has other interests and lacks the same single-minded nature of his father when it comes to basketball. Meanwhile, Warner Bros. Has created an enormous server bank with the help of an algorithm named about as cleverly as you would expect from this sort of movie, Algorithm. Algorithm wants recognition from the world, and his master plan when making movies with LeBron falls through is to bring James LeBron into his server world and, I guess, beat him in front of the entire real world at his own sport of basketball. It's one of the biggest stretches for a plot I've seen in a long time for sure. Algorithm is no Ultron, and Don Cheadle is a, well, interesting choice for an antagonist. I guess his generally emotionless demeanor as an actor makes him the perfect choice for portraying a self-aware artificial intelligence, but I digress. Algorithm pulls LeBron and his son into the servers, full of Warner Bros.' many intellectual properties, divides them up, and challenges LeBron to said basketball game. One of LeBron's challenges is to go through the serververse and recruit a team of basketball players throughout all of Warner Bros.' many and varied IPs. But in an attempt to put LeBron at a disadvantage, Algorithm sends him to Toon World, who he refers to as Rejects. It would seem that despite Space Jam's movie poster appearing during a presentation created by Al G himself, and the fact that the Looney Tunes all seem to remember the original Space Jam, the AI didn't actually think to watch the original Space Jam. Way to drop the ball there. So now the million-dollar question. Should you go see Space Jam: A New Legacy? Honestly, I'm torn on how best to answer this. The movie has some solid crossovers among Warner Bros. Franchises, consistently proves that the writers are self-aware, and the CGI and animation is great, but it fails to hold the movie up. The plot of the movie is more than a bit dull, the acting is phoned in most of the time, and the entire movie serves almost exclusively to be an advertising machine for LeBron James, Warner Brothers, the NBA, and, to a lesser extent, Nike. Unfortunately, that's not even the worst part about it. The movie spends a ton of time basically worshipping LeBron James, referring to him as king every other minute and praising him as one of the best basketball players of all time. Call me nostalgic, but I think the guy doesn't hold a candle to Jordan, be it on or off the court, and especially not in this movie. While there are plenty of differences between the original Space Jam and A New Legacy, the biggest difference is that the movie has an almost complete lack of charm to it. The original Space Jam had an obvious slant towards Jordan and the NBA, but nowhere near the level of in-your-face that A New Legacy throws at its viewers. So again, should you go see it? If you happen to have HBO Max and you want to bathe in a nostalgia of Space Jam and appreciate the minor deluge of meta jokes and amusing crossovers, then absolutely go see it. It's tough to really justify going out of your way to see this in a theater, though. Anyway, on to the spoilers.
Oh my god! Okay, it's happening!
Beyond the aforementioned meta jokes and crossovers, there is some small amount of credit I have to give to the writers. They clearly went out of their way to attempt to make the plot stand alone from the original Space Jam. Whereas the Looney Tunes recruited Jordan in the original Space Jam, James is the one recruiting the Looney Tunes. Whereas Jordan had all of them there from the start, James has to go out and find them. Best of all, Bugs had an ulterior motive to gather the Looney Tunes despite being well aware that LeBron's picks were all logically sound, superior choices. If you had to recruit a team of basketball players from Warner Brothers franchises, why wouldn't your first pick be Superman? The Jordan bait and switch near the end is also an unexpected and genuinely genius joke to make, so kudos to the writers there. Having said that, a lot of the plot focuses on the fact that LeBron chooses to not have fun as a kid and instead focus on developing his basketball skills. So the fact that he knows most of the Warner Brothers characters he's attempting to recruit is extremely odd. It makes sense that he knows Bugs Bunny, considering what they show of his childhood in the movie, but when does the guy find time to watch the Iron Giant? For that matter, why would you try to recruit Trinity when Neo is the objectively superior choice? Another part that really had me laughing more than anything else in the movie is the Warner Brothers characters in the background during the basketball game. Besides it being a veritable Where's Waldo level of recognizable characters, anytime the camera zooms in on, say, Don Cheadle or LeBron James for various scenes, you get to feast your eyes upon the Spirit Halloween and Dollar Store cosplay characters. Like, I get that you're obviously not going to get Danny DeVito to reprise his role as the Penguin from Tim Burton's Batman Returns for the 2 seconds of screen time he's got, but the guy looks almost nothing like him. That's just one example of several. It's downright hilarious, if not some of the most funniest moments in the film, watching Family Dollar Pennywise talk to the other fictional characters around him. Still, even though the writers attempted as best they could to deviate from the original Space Jam, they struggled to keep the suspense during the game itself. Much like the Monstars in the original Space Jam, the Goon Squad gained a huge point lead in the first half. Similarly, the Toons gained motivation going into the second half of the game and let loose in their usual cartoony way to tie the game, just like in the original Space Jam. Hell, I'm just shocked they didn't make LeBron's arms stretch going into the final shot. The difference in the last quarter of the movie are fairly minimal, but considering it's been 25 years since the original Space Jam release, there's probably far more people who haven't seen it than ones who have, so I guess by majority rule they can get away with it. Doesn't mean I have to like it though. And while we've discussed it already, I think it's worth swinging back around to the most glaring problem of the movie, the advertising. It's extraordinarily blatant, all the way down to the Nike swoosh that LeBron makes when he lands on Toon World. It's such an odd choice considering the tons of controversies Nike has gone through in recent years, like their use of overseas sweatshops to create their shoes, but if that were all, I'd have let it go. While they removed it from the movie posters and other various kinds of marketing materials, it's still right there on LeBron's jersey during the final game. It's quite a bit of overload. I would love to sit down and enjoy the movie for what it is, but there are very few moments of rest when it comes to the movie's bum rush of advertising, and I wish I could say those moments of rest contain anything resembling good acting or plot, but alas, here we are, having watched one of the most notoriously blatant advertising in movies since The Wizard introduced us to the Power Glove. Anyway, man, that was all over the place. It was a struggle to put together the shattered pieces of the puzzle after that movie, but somehow we survived together. If you want more chunky beef, be sure to check out my social media, links in the description below. Thanks for watching.